The Towering Inferno was developed and released on the Atari 2600 by a company called US Games in 1982. US Games is another one of those companies that just sorta sprouted into existence, made about a dozen or so Atari games, and then vanished back into the ether sometime in the early 80s. They were responsible for a few games that you may have heard of, such as MAD or Space Jockey. US Games was founded in 1978 and originally produced handheld electronic sports games. Then they were bought by Quaker Oats, yep, that same Quaker Oats, in 1982, and they were tasked to produce nothing but Atari 2600 games. So you could be sitting there eating your Quaker Oats and playing your Atari games, and then a year later the company was dissolved. The Towering Inferno is one of the games that we were left with in the wake of their existence, and, well, it's not that bad. So this was based loosely off of a movie of the same name. The Towering Inferno movie was released in 1974, starring Steve McQueen and Paul Newman, about a group of people trying to escape a skyscraper that's burning up. There were a whole slew of these types of disaster films in the 70s. Earthquake, the airport films, The Swarm, and the Poseidon Adventure about a capsized ocean liner. The Towering Inferno game is about as close to the movie's premise as you could probably get given what you had to work with on the console. You play as an unnamed fireman who's tasked with going up every floor of this building in search of survivors. The game opens with a nice little cutscene showing the helicopter dropping you off in the burning building. There are 4 survivors on each floor. However, you don't actually see them. Instead, you have to fight or sneak your way through the floor and smash out the door at the top, then escape the floor back down through the way you came in. The idea here is that the survivors are trapped behind the door, and then you're leading them back out to safety through the way you came in. But instead of fighting enemies, you're fighting flames, or trying to go around them. Flames of various sizes are swirling through each floor. Your only weapon is a fire hose. You do have unlimited water, although the range is pretty limited and you can only shoot up or down for some reason, not side to side. Okay, so I mentioned that the goal is to rescue the survivors trapped behind the door at the top of the screen and then lead them safely back out the way you came in. If you manage to do so, you even get a cool little cutscene showing you fly the survivors back down to the street below. Seems easy enough, however, there is a time limit. If you take too long, the survivors will start dying off one by one, which is actually pretty morbid when you think about it. The time limit per survivor starts to decrease the further up the tower you get as well, thus increasing the difficulty the further you go. On the first floor, you have about 20 seconds per survivor, but on the floors near the top, it gets down to about 5 seconds or so before the first survivor dies. You'll hear a high-pitched sound if a survivor perishes. Also, you get 4 lives per floor. Lose all of your lives from touching the flames and the game is over. Also, if you die by fire, the door at the top is closed and you have to do the whole floor over again, although thankfully the flames don't respawn. There are 9 floors in each building, and also there are 9 buildings in the game. So technically this is a game that could be beaten with an ending, although I don't know of anyone that has done so, and I certainly couldn't. This game has 7 different game variations, including a 2-player alternating turns mode, which is pretty cool. Thankfully, it also has a practice mode, which lets you replay a floor if you lose all of your lives or if the survivor timer runs out. There's a few indicators on the screen letting you know which floor you're on, how many survivors are left, how many firefighter lives you have left, along with your score. You get 1 point for putting out flames and 25 points per survivor you save. Although, to be honest, this is one of those games where you're just happy to finish a round, and you're really not too worried about your score, or at least I wasn't. So, there are a few things I liked and a few things I didn't like about this game. For starters, it's a change of pace from the usual trough of space shooters the Atari is known for. I applied the creativity that went into this. It's a rescue mission instead of a shoot 'em up. They also crammed a lot into this game. Each floor of the building is a little different, with 9 floors, 9 different buildings, and the little cutscenes between each floor. That's pretty significant given the year and the console limitations that they had to work with. The sound effects aren't bad either, and sound like, well, they sound like what you would expect the Raging Inferno to sound like if it were piped through an Atari. It is what it is, but it's not bad. There's also an impressive amount of stuff just going on screen at once with all of these flames flailing around. Unfortunately, this game is pretty tough to play once you get past the first few floors. The time limit is brutal, and the flames are very erratic. It's tough to pick up the pattern, which, I mean, to be fair, they're supposed to be flames, so that's probably how it should be. It's intense they made the AI so unpredictable, but it makes the thought of actually finishing this game seem impossible. I also wasn't crazy about not being able to shoot to the left or the right, and it's also got that goofy thing where your water stream is slightly off-center, so that's annoying. It's also possible to get hung up on the walls or the corners, and I felt like this always seemed to happen at the worst possible time. You also can't put out the flames if they're inside the walls. You can only put them out if they're out in the open, although technically, if you play this on the higher difficulty switch setting, you can't even see the flames in the wall, so that sorta makes sense. It's supposed to be a surprise when they burst out of the wall. So, would I recommend the Towering Inferno on Atari? Well, I didn't have any emotional attachment to this game as a kid, so admittedly, I went into it cold. The gameplay is unique enough to make it interesting. This is different than your average Atari game, but I wouldn't go out of your way to try to track this one down either. It is cheap though. You shouldn't pay more than $5 for it as a loose cartridge. What did you think of this one? Did you play Towering Inferno as a kid? Did one of you actually beat this game? I'd love to hear how far any of you actually got in this. I got through the first and second buildings on practice mode and then sort of ran out of patience after that. Well, as always, thank you for watching. Please don't text and drive, and I'll see you next time on Friday Night Arcade.